Hey there, welcome to episode number 296 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I'm Brian Goulet here of gouletpens.com, and got a good episode for you today. This one's going to have to hold you over because I'm not going to be shooting one next week. I got some conflicts in my schedule, so this is going to have to be good enough for the next couple of weeks. Yeah, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about I got a lot of feedback from last week's episode first, so I got some things that I want to talk about there. If fountain pen ink is okay to use with calligraphy pens. Usually I get questions about if calligraphy ink is okay in fountain pens, but it's the other way around. Journals with crinkly paper. Tips for getting a shimmering ink flowing again if it's clogged up in your pen. A good pen solution for a long-haul trucker who's changing altitudes many times a day. What I would write with if I could never use a fountain pen again, my Rubik's Cube solve times, and I'll be spotlighting the Monteverde Ritma Midnight Orchid, which is a new special edition that we just got in. So there you go, it should be fun. Let's start it off with a good amount of feedback. All right, so got lots of feedback about triangular pen grips. Honestly, didn't expect to get so much, but had some really good suggestions and stuff, so I wanted to include them. Let's see here. Pamela Snyder said, regarding the triangular grip, I would contend that the Pilot Vanishing Point forces a triangular grip. Don't you think? You were not the only one to comment about that, Pamela. So a lot of people commented about it. I didn't include it because it's not actually a triangular grip. It just has the clip on a round thing. So in essence, yes, it does make you have a three-fingered grip, but it's really not a triangle gripped pen. Maybe I'm being a little more strict on the definition of that, but in effect, it does something similar. That would definitely be an upgrade. That was the nature of the question was, what are triangle grip pen upgrades? But I don't know if somebody's truly a fan of the triangle grips. I don't know if the Vanishing Point would cut it or not. That was maybe a little bit of a point of debate in the comments, and that's okay. Let's see here. Some Arcfied said, do they no longer make the LAMY Idios fountain pen for a somewhat angled grip? I don't know if it's Idios or Idios, actually. I completely forgot about that pen, to be totally honest with you. So we do sell that pen. I mean, we would, but we have not gotten a restock of that pen, I think, since the initial order that we got of it. LAMY had some production issues. I think it had to something with the palladium plating or something like that. So if you've noticed, we've had basically no palladium pens from LAMY for at least the last year. So I totally forgot about that pen. So I don't even have an Idios in my personal collection because we were shorted on them in the first round, and I didn't want to take a pen from somebody that really wanted it, and we haven't restocked. So I can't even show it to you, but it does have a sort of triangular grip, so that one would qualify if you can find one. And then let's see here. Name Like Nobody Else said the Vanishing Point with the clip between your fingers is like a guided grip, similar to the triangular grip. There you go. And the Mahjong V60 has recreated the Omas pen that was mentioned here. There you go. You can check that one out. I've not used that. And then Raven Wind said, Pilot Vanishing Point 18 karat gold nib is my favorite pen with the tri grip. My other tries are 13 LAMY Safaris and the other more favorable All-Stars and Joy. I only use tri grips. So there you go. Similar boat. Got lots of feedback about the girthier pens, which was kind of the header, the thumbnail of the video. So Michael Davis said, as a tattooer, we may hold that machine for 5 to 6 hours a day. Maybe more. Most of us like using 1 to 1.25 inch grips. I did the math on that. That's 25 to 32 millimeters. Now, that's really big for a fountain pen. Michael said, it's got to be big like that to grip for so long. Thin ones will kill your hands. So I don't know any fountain pen that has a grip that big. That would be massive. There's pens with an total diameter like that, like maybe the Pilot Custom Marushi or something like that. But most pens, even pretty big pens, you're looking at 12, 13 millimeters as a maximum grip diameter. Most of them are going to be closer to 10 or less. So yeah, over 10 millimeters is pretty big for a fountain pen. You're not going to get anything quite as big, but also like a tattoo gun, that thing's vibrating in your hand all day. So that's going to fatigue your hand a lot more in addition to the grip. But y'all would know you're using this quite a bit. So I thought that was interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. And Nathan King says, the trend in pens over the last decade is most certainly towards larger, thicker sections and bodies. I prefer pens of more vintage proportions. I'm glad there are such a variety of sizes, but I worry that choice and variety of smaller pens will continue to decrease. I don't know. It depends. There's definitely a trend of larger pens, and is that going to continue? I have no idea. We'll see. Jeffrey Hall had a big old paragraph in there, so I'm going to paraphrase some of it. Hey, Brian, superior Q&A this week. Almost too much to respond to. But you did good, Jeffrey. I think that a lot of folks who have spent years writing with ballpoints, pencils, and other types of writing instruments get used to having to use pressure to write, draw, etc. In order to provide pressure, you sort of have to have a more robust grip on the tool. When I really got into fountain pens, I realized that neither a death grip or pressure on the paper was necessary to make fountain pens work, which is true. They're more like paintbrushes, where you glide over the media and apply your ink, paint, etc. So I think a lot of pen newbies need to relearn gripping the pen and writing as lightly as possible to get the result they desire. It's kind of true, and the reason I included this comment is because I've never quite heard it explained like using a brush before. So if you ever try to write, they have brush pens and stuff like that. If you ever try to write with a brush and if you mash it down there, it's not going to work great. You have to, have a very, very fine touch. It's kind of true to think of a fountain pen similar to that. You really shouldn't be mashing that thing down there. It takes a lot of getting used to, and probably doesn't come as naturally to have a light touch on it as it would for a brush pen, because a brush pen you very obviously can see and feel when you're mashing that thing down too much. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. So nice little additions there talking about grip and pen size and stuff like that. So that's it for feedback this week. Let's talk a little bit about new stuff. So I don't have a ton of new stuff to talk about. The main thing that I really have is actually going to be today's pen spotlight. So I won't go on and on about it now, but it's the Monteverde Ritma Midnight Orchid. So if you're familiar with the Ritma, it's just a different color of Ritma. But it's pretty cool. It's got gunmetal trim, ruthenium trim, black nib on it. The color is really nice. The color, it's a purple, but it's got some blue to it. Depending on which images you're looking online, this is one of those colors that can be a bit tricky to color adjust because it really depends on the lighting. If you're looking at it in lower light, more of the blue comes out. And if you shine a really bright light on it, the purple really pops. So even our own photos that we have, we color adjust everything, but the images are going to be representative of what the pen looks like under very bright light or more in more sunlight. But if you are looking at it in just an office with kind of overhead fluorescent lighting or whatever, it's probably going to lean a little more blue. So just kind of be aware of that. But anyway, I have some other purple color pens to compare it to. That's what I'm going to do in the spotlight today. So we're going to get to that, but it's a $40 pen, which is pretty darn good deal. Comes with a converter and everything. And it's got some neat packaging too, which I'll show you. And so extra fine through 1.1 plus an OmniFlex option. So some pretty good ones. We've got those in stock now at Goulet Pens. It's going to be, it's their 2025 kind of color of the year sort of thing. They don't call it that, but that's basically what Monteverde is doing. So it's going to be around for a while, but not forever. Okay. But I think it'll be most of the year, so you don't have to rush to get it. But I don't know if you're interested in it. Give it a shot. It looks really nice. All right, quick couple of company updates, and then we're going to get into the questions. One thing that I have is a video that I shot on the Pilot Vanishing Point Decimo, filling it. For those of you who are loyal, tried and true, pen users, watchers, you're probably going to be like, this is the most basic video ever. But there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to fill these or have never used one. And there's some nuances with filling them, and just wanted to make a very concise video that also is pretty informative. So I've got one on that that's out there. So let me know what you think of that format of video. It's much more like hands-on tutorial style, much more concise than this format. So trying to mix it up a little bit. And then I think I mentioned this already, but I'm going to be taking next week off. So after publishing this episode, number 297 is going to be coming on February 7th of 2025. So this will be the last one I'll have for you in January here, which is crazy because this month has flown, even though it's felt like it's taken forever because it's been a crazy month. Anyway, that's all I got for right now. Let's do some questions. All right, first question comes from Sarah Grace Cornell. It says, I just recently started calligraphy as a coworker got me a beginner's calligraphy set. I know you can't use calligraphy ink in fountain pens. That is true because it is too thick. It's not the right type of ink. It's confusing because a lot of times things get marketed across the two kind of worlds, but it's kind of like diesel and gasoline. It's like you don't want to put the wrong one in the other. It's not exactly like that, but still, you don't want to put calligraphy in your fountain pens, is what I'm saying. But do you know if I could use fountain pen ink in the calligraphy pens? So can you go the other way with it? Or do I need to get the special calligraphy ink? So it's the kind of situation like if you're using a calligraphy ink in a fountain pen, that's going to be problematic. A lot of them are either like shellac based or acrylic based. That's not going to flow well in the pen for one, but then if the thing like dries up in there, it's going to clog. It's going to clog. It's going to kind of dry up in there, and then there's no good way to clean it out. It's going to ruin the pen. Not all inks that are marketed as calligraphy inks are that way though. Some are water-based, theoretically could be used with fountain pens, but I really wouldn't use anything that's not specifically like advertised as fountain pen ink in your fountain pens. Everything we sell at gouletpens.com is fountain pen ink. So it's kind of crazy. It's like not all fountain pen inks necessarily say fountain pen ink on them, but on our site, we're all fountain pens. We don't sell any calligraphy ink. So just know that you're fine there. But it is kind of confusing when you have certain brands that make both. Usually you get very clear kind of stuff stating which one is which, but it never hurts to clarify that because you definitely don't want to mix them up. So that said, fountain pen ink is water-based. So it is going to be less risky, I guess. You can pretty much put fountain pen ink in whatever you want because it's water-based. There's really nothing in it that's going to cause any major problems, whether it's a glass dip pen, whether it's a, metal, dip calligraphy pen or like a spring metal nib, spring steel, I think it's called, and a regular fountain pen. There's like refillable felt pens, there's refillable rollerball pens. Really, fountain pen ink is kind of the universal ink that's made to be used in all those types of things because it's generally pretty safe. There's nothing in it that's going to conflict with any of those things. Now that said, calligraphy pen, like dip pens, are generally made to be used with ink that is thicker. It has different properties. So it does not have the same surface tension. And it's, the fact that ink is thicker allows it to sort of like hang more on the nib when you dip it and therefore write longer. And it also like dries more on the surface of the paper. So the property is going to be a little different when it's drying on the page. So if you're truly trying to do calligraphy, they make ink for that for a reason. But that said, there's no reason you can't try to use a fountain pen ink with a dip calligraphy nib. In fact, we sell things like the Kakamori. We have a couple of dip pens. They're not like true calligraphy, but they're, like dip pens from the Sailor, the Dipton, and Pilot has a couple dip pens too. So we do sell those mostly because they're very convenient for like ink sampling and testing out different colors of ink because you don't have to clean out a whole pen with the feed mechanism and everything. You can sort of dip it and go and write with it. Now, most dip pens, if you use a thicker ink, calligraphy ink, it's going to write better. It's going to write longer. So it's usually more ideal in that way. But there's some ways that you can do that. Like there's so many different types of calligraphy nibs out there. It's kind of crazy. But if you have a calligraphy nib that has one of those like reservoirs on top of it, it's like basically just a bent piece of metal that kind of sits on top of the nib. Those will do a better job of holding on to fountain pen ink, and you'll be able to write for a longer time. Not all nibs, calligraphy nibs, have those, but typically you see those on like italic nibs, which is good because they use a little more ink anyway. Any type of like flex nib or anything like that is probably not going to work super great with fountain pen ink, just because the spring steel, it's going to be much more flexible. It's not going to, I don't want to get all into the details of it for those, because a lot of you are probably like, well, that sounds amazing. I would want that to be done that way, but those nibs don't last as long. You spring them, you have to replace them all the time, and it's really made to be used with that thicker ink. So you can certainly try to use it with fountain pen ink, but you would have to really like tone it down. Like don't flex too much, or else it's just not going to flow down the nib. It's just going to railroad immediately. So yeah, you can definitely try. There's some inks that people have a little better success with, like pigmented inks, platinum carbon black, things like that. Some of the Sailor pigmented inks, those tend to be a little better with calligraphy nibs. But of course, nothing's going to be like quite as good as the real thing that's made for it. But I think the best of both worlds is when you can get, you know, a nib that kind of seems like a fountain, more like a fountain, like writes like a fountain pen nib, has a reservoir on it, and then you can use it for testing out fountain pen inks to get a sense of the color. Those are usually where I think they work best. But it's worth giving a shot. You know, there's no harm in trying. Just don't do it the other way around. Next question from AG8960. I'm a fountain pen newbie and falling in love with this new hobby. Welcome. I have two questions. I'm having some trouble figuring out on my own, and I kind of broke this up into two parts. So I'll answer them both. My favorite papers have a crinkly texture, and I love Tomoe River 52 gram. Which notebooks and journals have this paper? Well, I know our Goulet refillable notebooks, we have some that have the 68 gram, the thicker Tomoe River. We also have some with the 52 gram, that crinkly paper. I'm assuming crinkly texture, you mean like very thin paper. I'm not aware of many papers that are like actually textured to be kind of crinkly like that. That would not be super comfortable to write on, I would imagine. This is going to be a tough one because there are not a ton of notebooks out there that have that like 52 gram thickness to them. Really, Tomoe River is the only paper that I can think of that can like kind of perform well in a notebook, because you're running into two different needs, right? It's fine to have a really thin paper on something that's like a correspondence paper or stationery, something like that, because generally speaking, you're probably going to be writing on just one side of it. And, you know, you're going to have time to let it sit there and dry and stuff like that. But if you're writing with a notebook, you know, you're going to be closing that thing up afterwards. If you have a really ink resistant paper, you're more likely to get it to smear by closing it up too quickly. Or you're going to have a lot of show through on the back. You're going to see what you've written on the other side. And when you write on both sides, you're going to have a lot of competition from what's behind it. If not having like bleed through or something like that. Tomoe River is pretty good about not bleeding through, but most other papers that are that thin, they're not going to look great if you write on both sides. And then just, you know, having a thicker paper in a notebook, it just makes it a little more durable and stuff like that too. So there are not a ton of options that I can think of that have that like a crinkly kind of paper in a bound notebook. Tomoe River is kind of the only one I can think of. So I might be missing something. I know our notebooks do because we source them out. But Hobonichi is another brand that I think they do. I don't know if they just do notebooks or planners or whatever it is. I know they use Tomoe. We get asked a lot if we can carry them, but they only sell to brick and mortar stores, so we can't get them. Yeah, and there might be others out there. I'm not super knowledgeable about like super thin paper and notebooks, but maybe you all are. Somebody who's watching, maybe you can comment. That'd be great. So yeah, that's pretty much what I got. And then your next question said, I have trouble with getting my sheening and shimmering inks to do their thing in some of my pens. I try to unclog them by running the tip under the tap, but it doesn't always help. What am I doing wrong? Are there better pens and nibs for using these fun inks? I love your channel and appreciate the info. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And you're welcome. Let's see here. The tap thing, you know, that can be helpful if it's not too inconvenient. You know, what the heck, give it a shot. But it's really not cleaning out the pen. You're just rinsing it from the outside. So it's not a bad like first thing to try. But if it doesn't work that time, it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just that that's not getting deep enough to be able to kind of get the ink moving again. And honestly, there's nothing wrong that you're doing. Shimmering ink is more maintenance. It really depends on the type of pen that you're using. It depends on the ink and how much shimmer is in there. It depends on how dry your environment is. It depends on how well the pen seals. There's a lot of factors, but basically all of these things are going to work together to try to clog up your pen as much as possible. Like you have a physical particulate in the ink that is trying to flow through a very, very thin channel inside that feed, which is normally just meant to have liquid ink that uses capillary action. So, you know, by using shimmering ink, it's beautiful and we love it, but it is kind of a little bit of a hack. You know, fountain pen purists from the days of yore would probably be appalled at the fact that we're using like, glitter in our ink basically. And they would be like, of course it's clogging because you're using, stuff that's not meant to flow through the thing. There's a lot of inks where they use a really fine particulate and it's generally okay, but there certainly can be some clogging issues, and it's not really that you're doing anything wrong. That's just sort of the game. That's sort of just how it goes when you're using shimmering inks. So you really want to use it in some of like the broadest, wettest pens that you have, and it's unfortunate because I don't have like a super easy way to break down what all that is. From my experience, TWSBIs tend to work really well. TWSBI broad nibs do really, really well with shimmering inks. Like a TWSBI Eco Broad, I talk about that pen exhaustively, but it's because it just works so dang well with shimmering inks and other inks like that. So that's a pretty good one to go with. You can get a broad, you can get a 1.1 stub. That'll make your shimmering inks look pretty good. So that's one that I can easily recommend. But rather than just having like go buy a new pen, then I would say, some techniques that you can do. I'm actually going to break out my pen because I have a pen right now. Eco Broad. Ta-da! I don't think this is a shimmering ink in it though. I have a shimmering ink in one that I keep in my bag at home that I take for like other needs. But so if you have a pen, you can't really do this with vacuum fillers, but any pen that's a cartridge converter, if it's got a piston, so you have the converter in there, or you have a piston filling pen, the idea is going to be the same. So if the nib and everything starts to dry out, it starts to clog up a little bit, sometimes it just needs to get kind of wet again. Maybe this would work. I don't know if this would work as well. If you've already tried rinsing it under the tap and it's still not flowing, maybe this would work, maybe not. But you just untwist the piston a little bit to force some of the ink down. Now be careful, because if you do it, ink can come out and actually drip onto whatever the surface is. So, just do it over top of something that you don't mind getting a little ink on if you need to. Or especially if it's like a napkin or a tissue or something, that can help too. Just let a little bit of ink down, and that will sort of like resaturate within the feed. Because what can happen sometimes is like the pigment can like settle out of it, the shimmer can kind of settle out of it and kind of get stuck in that feed. But if you just get some ink kind of flowing through it again, it might be able to kind of work its way through. This is especially common if you've had a pen with shimmering ink in it and it's been sitting there for a little bit, maybe with the cap off, or maybe you just haven't used the pen in a week or two. And, it's like right now in the wintertime, it's kind of crazy. We keep a hygrometer here because we've had issues with like humidity and our heating system and stuff like that. And I remember in the summertime, it would easily be up in like the 70s in terms of like relative humidity percentage. And right now it's in the teens, which is just crazy. So it's such a big swing in difference, even in the same locale, just between the seasons, right? So that's going to be a big factor as well. If you're in a drier environment, your pen is more likely to dry up and clog more. Funny how that works. So yeah, that's something you can do. You can little bit of ink down through your feed. You can also, if you have your bottled ink, you can, if assuming which ink you filled from, you can put it back down in there, and you can actually flush and fill the pen again. Like flush, rather than rinsing it out, at the sink or whatever. Just literally take the pen before you've rinsed it at all, and just dump the ink back into the bottle if you're comfortable doing that, and then fill it again, and do that a few times. And that can sometimes get some stuff flowing through again. And since you're using it with the same ink you already had in there, it should work pretty good. You can do the same thing with just plain water, but then you're going to have a very diluted, kind of thing. You're basically cleaning your pen at that point, which is always an option too. If your pen is like, you're trying these things and like just not flowing again, give it a rough cleaning. You don't have to clean it with a, toothbrush or anything. But just, flushing, filling it, with water, get it going again, refill it with ink. They'll probably get it there. But then you really are kind of like cleaning the pen. But that's an option. And if that doesn't work, well, then you might have some stuff that's like really gunked up in there. You might actually need to clean it with like some water and dish soap, or, a little pen flush or something like that. Or if you're comfortable disassembling the pen, depending on the pen, which it is and your comfort level, cleaning it mechanically with something like a toothbrush would be the step to go even beyond that. So nothing unusual. Everybody deals with this who loves their shimmering ink. And if any of y'all have any other tips that are helpful, please let me know. But there you go. Good luck. You're doing great. Welcome to the fountain pen world. Lord Ishmael has the next question. I just settled into my long-term career as a trucker. I've been using a LAMY All-Star as my daily driver, filling out forms on the go. However, it is not ideal as driving all day. I commonly go through mountains with large elevation changes. If I don't keep my pen near full capacity, I get the dreaded burping and following cleanup. So my question is this: are there any pens like the TWSBI Vac pens that have the ability to fully seal and help allow for controlled pressure equalization by cracking the cap with the pen upright, like opening a soda, or similar anti-burping measures built into the pen? I like the Vacs in theory. However, my last one got a bent piston as I'm pretty clumsy, and I don't really want to get another one and risk that again. Okay, this is a pretty specific scenario, but I thought it was an interesting question because it's exactly the kind of situation that, like, yeah, these are good things for you to understand the principles of how they're working so you can apply them, in your situation. So yeah, I don't know the details of your like trucking routes and stuff like that, but if you are changing elevations like several thousand feet at a time, I mean, that I can absolutely see that being an issue. And essentially you're going to be dealing with the same kind of pressure variations that you're going to have if you're flying. So typically if you're flying with a pen, as you ascend, so you're going from ground level up, typically it depends on where you're flying from. But I believe that most planes, they're pressurizing to about a 6,000 foot elevation, somewhere about that. So if you're going from sea level or close to it and you're going, above 6,000 feet, you're going to have the most pressure change happening in that period. When you're descending, it's not as big of a deal because the pressure is increasing as you go down, and it's forcing ink into the pen instead of out of it. But when you're going up, the pressure is dropping. The pressure inside the pen is higher, so therefore it wants to push the ink out of the pen. That's what's going on there. So it doesn't matter whether you're flying and doing it rapidly within a few minutes, or if you're driving, 50 miles and you're going to be changing elevation, 4,000 or 5,000 feet over that period. It's going to have the same effect on the pen because it has to go somewhere. It doesn't matter whether it's happening quickly or slowly. I think it's interesting that you're having this issue with the LAMY All-Star because honestly, LAMY pens are one that I would think are maybe not going to do it as much. So it is kind of interesting. You're challenging me a bit more with this question. Typically, cartridge converter pens are going to be better in this respect because it really comes down to volume of ink, but volume of air. It's the volume of the reservoir. So if you have a big piston filling pen like this and the ink is relatively low, there's a big volume of air here relative to the ink. And so a piston filling pen or a vacuum filling pen with a large ink capacity, if there's a lot of air in there, it's way more likely to burp out of there with a pressure change. Whereas, so this pen like this, you got like close to 2 milliliters of ink capacity here. If it's only a quarter full, you got a milliliter and a half equivalent of air. That's a lot. Whereas if you have a cartridge, just your typical LAMY cartridges, I forget exactly how much. I think it's like 0.6 milliliters or something like that in there. So, it's going to be a quarter to a third of the volume inside an entire cartridge as you would have in something like a TWSBI here. So generally, I would say like cartridge converter pens are going to be better because there just isn't as much of a volume of ink and thus air in there. But you're having that issue with the LAMY, so I just think that's really interesting. You would probably have an even tougher situation if you had, a piston or vacuum filler because the air in there would be greater. Really, there's nothing aside from vacuum filling pens that seal off like that. And the thing is, when you're using the vac filling pen, based on how you were talking about it here, it's not really that cracking the cap open is doing a lot necessarily. I mean, the reason the vac fillers are good at not burping while in transit is because when you screw the mechanism down for the vacuum filler, the O-ring on it is actually sealing off the ink chamber from the rest of the pen. So while the cap may have a little bit to do with it, that's actually not what's keeping the ink from expelling out of there. It's the seal on the piston rod itself, which you can only really have with one of those pens. So there are very, very few other pens that have any type of mechanism like that. It's kind of just by design only going to be a vacuum filling pen. And the TWSBI vacuum filling pens are by far the most economical. So, I wouldn't recommend you get a more expensive one like the Pilot Custom 823 if you're worried about being clumsy and bending it and stuff like that. The TWSBI is going to be the better way to go for you. So really, that is the optimal solution for your situation, is something like a TWSBI Vac 700R or a TWSBI Vac Mini. Those are both going to seal off well. The Vac Mini would probably be even better because the ink capacity is lower on that pen. So it's just a smaller chamber of air potentially to leak out of the pen. And then the Vac 700R, is a bigger pen. And I think both could work for you, and they'll still write even without having to crack the thing open all the time. So I don't know, you have a unique circumstance here that I think is very interesting. But if you go work on the same principles as if you're flying with the pen, you should generally be okay. My other thing, without you having to go and buy something else, is really pay attention to the way the pen is positioned. So if you think about it, water wants to take the path of least resistance. So if you have pressure inside the pen that is, pressurizing the ink, it's going to force the ink out in wherever is the path of least resistance, which is always out of the grip, and that's out of the nib. If you have the nib pointed up like this, you might have a little bit of ink that's in the feed, but there might be some kind of air that can kind of work through. So an air chamber in the pen here, as I'm increasing in elevation, the pressure is increasing, but it's increasing and it's able to kind of work its way out of the nib, and the ink is all down here. So that the ink is not, most of it at least, is not in between the air chamber and where it wants to go. So if you haven't paid much attention to that, do that first. So take all your pens that you're using, and it might be a little bit annoying to have to think about this at first, but you can just make it habit. Have it in your shirt pocket, have it in just a cup holder or something. If you have them just laying on your dashboard, or they're in a pen case or something that's just laying down like this, or, even worse, if they're pointed down like this, they're much more likely to burp on you. Whereas if you have them pointed up like this, the chance will be cut down significantly, vacuum filling pen or not. So that is what I would recommend the most. And then of course, either having the pens completely empty or completely full is going to be the best too, because there's either no ink on the one that's empty, duh, or the one that's completely full. There's no air for it to pressure equalize change. So those are my recommendations for you. I think those are your best options, and good luck to you. All right, next question. Imperator Lucius on Instagram said, if you could never write with a fountain pen again, what would you write with? Ugh, what a terrible thought. I actually had to think about this for a minute, because I have been using fairly exclusively fountain pens for 15 years plus. I don't have I use Pilot G2s a bunch, the G2 rollerball. They're not my they write okay, but as a pen, to hold them and stuff, it's not my favorite. They're very light and all that. There might be better versions of rollerballs and stuff that you can get that use that refill, but that's just kind of the go-to thing that I have for when I can't use a fountain pen. I think probably the thing, where I was getting at with all that is I'm really not up to speed on what decent non-fountain pens are these days. I'm probably going to be very ignorant. So I've got to go way back in my Rolodex in my head, and pull from what I enjoyed using in the past. And there may be some new things that I could enjoy more, but honestly, every new thing that I've even tried has been just it's not a fountain pen. It's nothing is going to be as good as a fountain pen in my eyes. So I haven't even bothered to try and find a good go-to non-fountain pen. But I remember really liking the Pilot Precise pens. Before I really knew much about pens, I knew I liked writing with those. Come to find out, it's because they essentially are roller balls that use fountain pen ink. It's not exactly fountain pen ink. I don't think. They formulate a little differently probably. But basically it's a liquid ink like you would use with a fountain pen. And it's even got like a kind of a feed fin system in there. So yeah, of course it makes sense that like that's what I would have gravitated to before I knew fountain pens existed. Like that's what I used in school. I liked using mechanical pencils because honestly, I was a tinkerer and I just liked taking my pencils apart all the time. So that's part of why I used it. And I would sketch and doodle and stuff in class. But whenever I use pens, the Pilot Precises were my favorite. So that would probably be the pen, the Precise. I would like something with a little more weight though. So maybe there's some better, version of that. But that would be it. And then I will give a little honorable mention here to the Pilot Friction. Now that is a ballpoint. So from a writing experience, not my favorite. I would not want to have to write exclusively with that. But the convenience of being able to essentially erase your pen is super cool. So I will use a Pilot Friction, when I'm like writing notations on like my chord chart or my music or something like that when I'm playing. I'm a bit old school with music. I have like iPads, stuff like that, but it's like, if I need to make chord changes or write in accidentals on a piece of sheet music, it's just, I don't know. I like doing it on paper. So that's where the erasable ballpoint comes in. But I would happily give up that capability. If I could only use one pen the rest of my life, I would give up the friction erasable convenience in those circumstances for just an overall better writing experience with the Pilot Precise. So there you go. Precise. That's my answer. All right. Last question for this week is from Trucker Squirrel. New to fountain pens, loving your channel and store. Thank you. Curious what your times are on the Rubik's Cubes that you have in the back of some of these videos. I do have some puzzles around, I got some over here. Got, one on my desk. I have a lot of puzzles, and some of the old, like pen casts and stuff that we did, I, had some like much bigger puzzles that were back there. I've talked about puzzles various times, because I like talking about things that I enjoy. So go figure. The one I have back here, this is actually, well, I'll go grab it real quick. It's real back there. It's not just a, it's not just a green screen. This is a 6x6. I don't solve this one all that often. So if you don't know a lot about Rubik's Cubes, they're all built with an internal core and they have fixed centers. That's kind of the whole, essential basis of understanding how a Rubik's Cube works. So that is fine for all of the odd numbered, Rubik's Cubes. But when you get into the even numbered ones, the 4, 6, 8, and so on, they do not have fixed cores anymore because there's, an even number and it's got a split in the middle. So these ones, you end up with different like parity algorithms that you have to solve because your centers can actually end up getting switched and it can become, sort of unsolvable. So you end up with these specific extra steps that you have to do. And there's different probabilities for like when you'll end up with these different parities. I'm going way deeper than I need to on all this, but essentially it's more difficult to solve even numbered cubes. But if you're in competition, right? It's been a couple of years since I've actually looked up the things and the rules may have changed, but in actual Rubik's Cube competition, they have a 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, 5x5, 6x6, and 7x7. They make bigger ones than that, and they make all kinds of other shapes and, things like that. But those are the ones that they do for actual competitions. So I have timed myself for some of them. I've never been in actual competition, so none of my times are valid. They're all just self-timed, which of course you take that for what it is. I'm not am I a speed cuber? I don't know. So like if you paint a painting, no matter how bad, does that make you a painter, Or if you sing something, does that make you a musician? I mean, I don't know. You tell me. It's one of those things like I've read up, like if you've ever timed yourself solving a Rubik's Cube, then you're a speed cuber. I'm like, okay, but I'm not a competitive speed cuber. I just do it for fun. I really wanted, when I first started solving them, this was like, I did it pre-COVID a little bit, but really when COVID kind of hit, it was an easy thing I could do, relieve stress, be at home. I wanted to be able to solve a 3x3 in under 30 seconds. That was my kind of like goal. It's not easy to do. that's not the hardest thing in the world, but especially in your mid to late 30s, which I was at the time as I was doing this, your timing and reflexes and ability to learn is not the same as when you're a teenager. So it took a little bit of doing. So that's the best I've ever done. So I looked it up. I actually had some like times on my phone where I used to record these things. So the fastest I ever did on a 3x3 here was 24.62 seconds. I think I may have gotten lower than that. I think I may have gotten 23 at one point, but that's the lowest I was able to find like recorded in my phone. My average for 3x3, which is, you can get like a fast time, but you might get lucky with a particular like solve algorithm or whatever. But so like taking the average of your solves is really like more of a true metric for your speed, stuff like that. My average tends to be like between 40 and 45 seconds. It would probably be slower now because I'm a bit out of practice. I'd probably be over a minute now because just some of the algorithms have gotten stale in my brain. But yeah, so my average at the time, tended to be around 40 seconds. I apparently have never timed myself on a 4x4 or a 5x5. I couldn't find any record of it. I think I did at some point, but I don't know. The 6x6 here, I did find a time, 6 minutes and 51 seconds was the best time I had from the 3 times that I measured it. And a 7x7 I did in 9 minutes and 21 seconds. So there you go. I have all kinds of other bigger cubes. But what I determined for my own style was that for me, it was not just about speed. Speed is interesting. It's kind of like flashier, more fun, and more competitive. But for me, it's like you end up memorizing so many different algorithms. It becomes so much more about muscle memory. So you just end up practicing over and over and over again, which is noble. But like, I found it more interesting to like actually try and like think and solve. So I ended up kind of going the other way with it rather than trying to get really good, really fast at, standard cubes. I got into buying all kinds of shape-shifting cubes and cuboids and, all kinds of wild looking things. And then learning how to solve much bigger, more complex puzzles that are not for speed, but more for just kind of understanding how they work and different things like that. So that's more the route that I went. So those are my times. They're not amazing, especially in the world of competition. If you're like over 10 seconds on a 3x3, it's like, don't even bother. You're not going to win anything for sure. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of fun. It's neat to do. There's lots of good YouTube videos out there. Anybody can learn how to do this. It's just a matter of how much you practice and how long you want to do it. So yeah, there you go. Fun question. Thanks for letting me talk about Rubik's Cubes. And if anybody wasn't interested, hopefully you were able to skip. But anyway, I do put timestamps in there for a reason. Let's talk about the pen spotlight now, the Monteverde Ritma Midnight Orchid. All right, this is the Monteverde Ritma. If you're not familiar with this pen, it's kind of a mid-size pen. It's made of metal, so it's got a little bit of weight to it, but it's not overly heavy. It's very comfortable for a big-handed guy like me. But it's a pretty decent universal size for a lot of different people. It does have a little slick grip, so that has to be okay on your side, but there's not an aggressive step here. So me personally, the metal here is like slightly more textured. It's not as slick. So I usually do okay with pens that have like a slicker grip if I have somewhere to grab onto back here that anchors it. So this for me is not a pen that I would like sit down and write like long notes with, but it's really convenient because it's a magnetic cap. It works pretty well. You can post it on the back and the weight's okay. You can write with it unposted too. It makes that cool pop sound. But really, it's a decent cartridge converter pen. It's a very convenient, just kind of like on the go writer. Standard international cartridge converter. So you can use that. It comes with a converter. Super convenient to use that way. The Ritma's been around for several years. It's been a pretty popular style. But this one comes in this special packaging, which is kind of neat. The box is nothing like amazing, but the packaging is really nice. And I think Midnight Orchid's a pretty cool name for it. Now I will say the color on this is a little bit tricky. Basically, the reason I wanted to feature it in the spotlight today is because I wanted to show you how it looks compared to some other pens that you may be familiar with, because the color is hard to show accurately in digital form. So first thing I want to show you, because it's like, it does kind of dance between purple and blue. I'm going to show you another metal pen. This is a ocean blue LAMY All-Star, showing it next to that. So here you can see like, oh yeah, that is definitely purple. Like there's no question about the purpleness of this pen. And then actually most of the other purples I had were very different, but the one that I had that was like brighter and more vibrant here was the Pilot Metropolitan. This is the Retro Pop purple. I don't know if I should hold them up so you can see them better. Is that better? Show them in a little bit of light. So yeah, you can see it's definitely got more of a blue tone, not quite as loud as the Retro Pop here, this is a pretty vibrant purple here. These are all metal pens with all kind of similar finish. So I thought that would be helpful at least to see these three. You can see kind of where this one lies. And then I got some other pens here to show you too. I don't know how helpful this one is. This is the regular blue LAMY Safari, but that's probably not that helpful. I'm gonna put that one aside. And then let's see here. I had the other Pilot Metropolitan. This is the leopard one. It's a darker purple. So, showing that in comparison, you can see there, like that looks really dark. So this does look more vibrant than that. And then I had the LAMY Safari and the Violet Blackberry, which is a nice looking color, but it is definitely more of like a plum kind of brown color compared to the Midnight Orchid. The pen that I found that was actually the closest in color was the LAMY Safari. This is from a special edition from a few years ago. The Violets, I think it was like called from the Candy Collection, I think it was. But that is pretty close. Now this is plastic, but it's a matte plastic. That's a pretty spot on purple, right? So if you want to know what that kind of looks like the most, it's, the Britma has a little bit more brightness to it because it is metal. So it's going to catch the light just a little bit more. Now I will say, if you're in like full bright sunlight, this thing is going to look more purple. It's going to pop a little bit more like this. If you have it much more in the dark, it's going to end up looking not quite this dark, but it's going to go a little bluer, a little darker. So I don't know, it's kind of a little shape-shifty color in a way, but it's going to look like a lot of different things. Some of the pictures that we've seen online look different because of how they're color adjusted, but I wanted to show you the full lineup here so that you could see what color this thing looks like and see if it's something that you were interested in for yourself. All right, so Brian Adventure time here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because honestly, things have been kind of crazy. We've had a lot of stuff going on in our team, had stuff going on with a lot of people in my personal life. Just a lot of people needing support, encouragement, assistance in various ways. So it's all like personal stuff that I can't really share, in a video setting to the internet. But that has taken a lot of my time, a lot of my energy, and I'm just honestly spending a lot of time caring for people. It's been a pretty rough going 2025 for a lot of people that I know. So I'm just really trying to be present and care for the people in my life. So the things that I have been doing in my spare time, one thing that I am pretty excited about. So if you have watched, pencasts of old and things where I've talked about the show Severance on Apple TV Plus. So I'm a huge fan of that show. I don't even know exactly what it is. Everything about that show just kind of hits me in the right way. I normally am a guy who's into comedies. Like I watch comedies in my downtime, not like thriller drama type stuff, but I don't know. This is just such an intriguing, the whole show is like a giant puzzle. So maybe that's why I really enjoy that aspect of it. And the cinematography is just fantastic. So I enjoy that one very much. It was left on a cliffhanger was it like 3 years ago when they shot the first season? I literally watched the first season 10 times through, the whole thing. I tried to recruit everybody in my family to be able to watch it. Not my kids. It's a little intense. But yeah, season 2 was just started releasing, was it Friday last week? So I watched it twice. I'm recording this on Tuesday. I may watch it more by the time, the next episode comes out, but they're doing it like old school. So it's like each Friday they're coming out with one episode, even though they've recorded them all. And I'm just like, oh, this is like how TV used to feel. It's just like torturous waiting in between. But, I have time to think about it and talk about it and, rewatch it if I want to. So I don't know. It's kind of like, it's like a slow burn. So for this type of show, I really enjoy it because every episode is like more questions than answers. but I'm really enjoying it. And supposedly season 2 is going to be a little more intense and a little more, fast paced and stuff like that. It's happening so far. So I'm really enjoying that. Let's see here. I showed you last week the little machine, the Native Instruments machine. It's literally called Machine. I got to tell you, that thing is sort of kicking my butt. It's literally like learning an entire new instrument, but probably even more complex. There's so many things that thing can do. It's like, I remember now why I had difficulty getting into some of these like electronic music things, because it just takes a lot of time invested in understanding how to do it. So I have the machine working and I can make some stuff, but it's like, there's so many settings and so many different things. It's just very, very humbling. It reminds me of like when I was brand new into fountain pens and I was like, I know how to write with a pen. Like, I'm not dumb. Why is this so complicated? And what am I doing wrong? It's a little bit of that kind of vibe. So in a way, it's kind of a helpful reminder for me, because it's like, yep, okay, this is a new thing. I'm not as familiar with it. And just all the terminology that they use in terms of like, this is a sound which fits inside an element, which is part of a group that then is in a pattern which gets used in a set. And I'm just like, what? Like, what is all this stuff? So just understanding like the architecture, the framework of how these different sounds work is like breaking my brain a little bit. But I'm having fun. Joseph's kind of learning it with me a little bit. And, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how much I can stick with this thing. It's kind of whooping my butt right now. But, I'll just kind of keep at it and invest a little bit of time here and there and see how it goes. I'm watching a lot of YouTube tutorials and stuff like that, because YouTube is awesome, because you can learn how to do things. I know because, y'all know, because I do fountain pen videos for a living. Anyway, and then let's see here. Joseph and I are working on a little project together. So he's a teenager. He's basically everything that he's interested in now, hobby-wise, is like things he wants to build and display, which totally makes sense. I was into Lego and Connects and model cars and all that kind of stuff at this age. So everything with him is like Lego. It's like Lego Bionicle. He's got this whole Lego Star Wars display thing. And he's into Gundam, like Gundam robot builds now. And so, yeah, everything he wants to build is something that needs to be displayed. So I kind of joke with him. I was like, why don't we just put like warehouse rack shelving in your entire room? Because everything eventually is going to end up just getting covered in stuff that's being displayed. And it's kind of a joke, but kind of not really, because we've already installed like 5 or 6 different shelves in his room to display all this stuff, and he wants to keep going. So anyway, one thing that we're working on is he wants to have like sort of like a cube, stepped kind of display structure, if you will, that he can put on top of his what do you call it? Like low boy dresser, whatever it's called. But he didn't want to have it be like one of these convenient cube systems that you can buy and assemble at like a, Target or IKEA or something like that. No, he wanted them all to be like individual cubes of a specific size and all this kind of stuff. He has a vision for it, because he wants to be able to arrange them and all that kind of stuff. And I was trying to convince him of different ways of like, well, there's this thing that we can conveniently buy and then build in like half an hour and then it's done. But he really wanted to like build it together with me, which is like, okay, I do love woodworking too. And like my son's actually expressing interest in doing a project with me. It's like, I am tired, but yes, I want to do that with my son. So we're working on that project together. So it's not much to show yet, so I don't really have any pictures, I don't think. But, it's the kind of thing that like, it's going to end up being, 4 sides and a back, and we're building 8 of these cubes. So it's like 40 total pieces of like 1 foot square pieces of wood. So it's like, okay, there's a lot of wood. It's just like, we're like, okay, we have to sand all of these pieces. So it doesn't take that long per piece, but when there's 40 of them, it can take a while. Anyway, but we're going to do it. We're doing it together. It's fun. I won't complain at all, because I enjoy building stuff with my son. So, and he will get to have exactly what he wants for his display when we're done with it. So that's kind of fun, but that's my project du jour. And that's kind of what I'm up to right now. It's been cold as crud here in Virginia. So yeah, hopefully y'all are staying warm or cold or whatever it is that you need wherever you are. But it's been an interesting year so far. So that's pretty much what I got for this episode. So I just want to wrap it up, say thank you so much for watching. Love to get more questions. So keep asking me stuff. Keep asking me stuff in the comments here. And I would love to, I love the engagement. Y'all give me a lot of good feedback on each episode, which I'm just really enjoying reading all the comments. Even if I don't respond, I'm definitely reading them through them all. And then, yeah. So I have no idea what's happening with TikTok. I don't even want to give like an update because I'm recording this on Tuesday afternoon here. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen 3 days from now for me to sound intelligent by the time you might watch this. So anyway, TikTok may or may not be a thing anymore. It's up in the air. But either way, we'll keep posting content everywhere that we can. And okay, I got a fun fact for you. This is going to seem very random, okay? But when I put on this shirt this morning, right? Part of the reason I like this shirt is because my eyes match this shirt like almost perfectly. And the reason I say my eyes match the shirt and not the shirt matches my eyes is because if you didn't know this, I actually have gray eyes. So there are different color eyes that people have, obviously. I believe they fall into 6 main categories: brown, blue, hazel, green, amber, and gray. And the rarest ones are green and gray. So what do gray eyes mean? If you've never heard anybody call them gray eyes or whatever it is, I'm going to explain that just a little bit here for you today. So according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology, all humans used to have brown eyes. Genetic variances or defects in some people's, genes that make up your eye color, they cause people to have a lack of melanin in their irises, which is, where the colors like amber and hazel and stuff like that would come from. It's basically a genetic defect. It's much more complex than it was in the way I was taught in school, where it's like just 2 genes. And it's like, oh, if your parents both have brown eyes, you have brown eyes. It's a lot more complex than that. And there's like epigenetic factors as well. But, more or less it's genetic as to what kind of eyes you're going to have. So I've got defective genes in my gene pool somewhere. It's interesting because my dad has, I guess you would call them amber eyes. But my dad's eyes are brown and my mom's were blue. And here I am, I'm with gray. So what gray eyes mean, basically, it's like because I don't have as much pigment in my irises, just more light is flowing through and you're seeing kind of like the light bouncing back through after it hits my eye. But what that means is a couple different things. So particularly, it's not like they're like perfect mirrors. And if I wear a yellow shirt, my eyes are going to be yellow, because it's a little more complicated than that. But particularly in like the blue and green range, basically, if my eyes are around blues and greens, it will pick up more of those colors and kind of reflect it back. So my eyes actually kind of change color based on my environment. So particularly when I'm wearing like a monotone shirt like this, that is like in the like dark green or blue family, my eyes will actually kind of shift to match the clothing, which I always thought was cool as a kid growing up. I didn't realize how unusual that was until people pointed out to me over my life, and I actually looked it up and I was like, oh, gray eyes are kind of rare. It's like 1% maybe. I read conflicting things. I read that like green eyes are the rarest in the world, that they say is like 2% of the population or 1%. But then gray eyes are like less than 1%, but they say green's the rarest. And I'm like, but that math doesn't work out. Either way, green and gray, very rare. But that's what I got. So anyway, other interesting things too. So brown is the most common color by far, followed by blue, and then, green and gray are the rarest. Your eye color can also change during your lifetime. So most often with babies, before they turn 1, their eye can change color. It can change in your life because of certain medical conditions that might happen, or with older, like age-related factors. So, usually like your melanin and stuff like that will kind of dissipate as you age. So a lot of people, their eye color gets lighter as they get older, as does like skin and stuff like that. So kind of interesting. So as I was putting on my shirt this morning, thinking about what I was going to wear for Q&A, I put on, I was like, oh man, my eyes match this shirt. And it's like, I don't know if I've ever talked about that. So kind of fun. So anyway, that's your fun fact for today. I hope you enjoy next week. We're going to have some regular videos that come out, but I won't have a Q&A, but I'll pick you up again in February. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, 2 weeks, and right on.